Hello, and welcome to the Say It Out Loud podcast. I am your host, Christine Dainard, and the goal of this podcast is to encourage you to live your best and most authentic life by digging deeper and finding connection through vulnerability. I believe we have been taught that vulnerability is a weakness, when in fact, it is our superpower. In this space, I will share personal stories and conversations with others so you can be empowered by their strength and inspired to take action in your own life. Thank you so much for being here. Now let's get started. Well, hey, welcome back to the show. It is me here, Christine. I am here and it's just you and me talking to you. We're going to do a little catch-up session here because it's been a little while. And if you're new to the podcast, thank you for being here. Hopefully you can go back and listen to some of the other episodes. So you can kind of catch up on some of the things that have happened here or the great conversations that I've had with people who are sharing their stories. But also I felt like it was a good time to come back and just kind of reconnect. This year, I made the decision to shift from doing a weekly podcast episode drop to doing a bi-weekly podcast episode drop. And it has been the best change for me anyway, for now. It has felt really, really good to make this shift. And I shared in the first episode release of this year about this change and about sort of like how I came to decide on this change and that I really needed to do it for me, that I'm a self-produced podcast, which means that there's a lot of time and energy and love that goes into these conversations or these episodes that you plug into. And I really wanted to continue doing it. It's a real passion project of mine. I enjoy using my voice. I enjoy sharing stories of others. I really want to keep having these conversations and saying the things out loud because I feel like it's important to do, to talk about the things that we don't talk about because, once we air out those things, it's cathartic. We feel better when we release them, but also when we talk about our stories and we talk about the things that people don't talk about, we help others realize that they're not alone in their struggle, right? It's like when someone's listening to our story or the things that we've experienced, they can go, oh my gosh, like I'm not the only one. Like I haven't been talking to anybody about this thing because nobody is talking about this. And I felt like I was alone in it. And so when we share our stories and we start talking about it, it helps everyone, it helps ourselves, it helps other people, and it helps create a different culture, which I would love to see a shift, instead of just always catching up with the Joneses or, doing what the expectation is or doing what we feel like we should do or are supposed to do or living our lives for other people. Instead, we're listening more to ourselves. We're listening more to our heart. We're listening to more of what's in us and what's in us to do in the world. And a big piece of that for me is sharing story, mine and others, and saying the things out loud. So it's really important to me that I keep doing this. And eventually I will probably get back to doing weekly episodes. At some point when I'm not self-producing anymore and I'm in a position where I can, hire a producer and they can do all the production stuff and I can just talk in the microphone, which is my favorite part, I will be happy to go back to weekly episodes. But for now, this is what I need to do to keep my sanity. I had to build a boundary around it for myself so that I can continue to show up here in my wholeness, give you the energy that I come here to give you, and honor myself, right? Honor the fact that I was feeling like I was doing too many things and I didn't have time for all of the things. And I really wanted to make time for this. And so sometimes we have to change what we're doing or how we're doing something in order to help it make more sense in our lives, right? Like it's okay to change. And I think that's a big piece of what I always want to share here is that you can change whatever you're doing at any time and that there's no one way to do any one thing. And if you've made a promise to yourself or to other people, you can shift that promise, right? You can change your mind. And, so I am doing that. I'm literally an example of the constant shift. And so hopefully there's something in that for you. And, but when I shared that last episode or that first episode this season, I was speaking to, why I needed to make some of these shifts. I was speaking to the fact that, my body had been telling me to make some of these shifts and that there were some things going on in my world that, were really pulling me toward doing other things or doing things differently. And a big part of what I dropped, I guess, back in that episode was that I'd had a bit of a health scare. And I've had a few people message me and say, hey, you talked about a health scare at the beginning of the year and we haven't heard anything more about it. So just wanted to kind of touch base with you and see, like, are you okay? Like, are you going to be all right? And I realized I didn't close the loop on that. And so I wanted to just come in and touch base with you and close the loop on that so that if it was on your heart or on your mind, that I can ease that for you. I am okay, but there certainly was something that occurred in my life that had me, making some shifts. And they were necessary shifts for me. They were shifts that my body had kind of been telling me all along, not all along, like not my whole life, but the last few years, my body has been kind of speaking to me, Like I have gone through so much change. I closed a business that I was super passionate about and built. It was like my business baby. And I closed it in 2022 and really had to face myself and get real with myself and have a better understanding about why I was taking it so hard and why I thought I was a failure because my business didn't make it through the craziest time of our lives where let's not even talk about that. And then really just reconnecting with myself, I think I know actually that I ran into so much fear during that time, those 3 years where things were upside down. And I was operating from a place of survival instead of a place of or thriving. And I really wanted to find myself back in thriving. When I launched the Buzz Tour Company, that was the former business that I ran. It was a boutique wine tour company. And when I launched the business, I was so excited about it and it was going incredibly well. And it grew like 300% in the first couple of years. And those 3 years after that were, to say they were difficult is an absolute mad understatement. But what happened, and there's a silver lining in there, and I feel like there's a silver lining for a lot of people from that time in our lives, is that I realized that there was something more out there for me. And I had to go through a lot of things and a lot of self-realization. I put myself through a lot of stress. I had to reconnect with myself. I had to become more familiar again with like intuitively leading me, like what's next for me, instead of just like doing what I felt like I had to do or was supposed to do. I really have resisted those words and those feelings my whole life and really wanted to take steps forward, but I didn't know where to start. And so, there's been a lot go on in my world, and I'm sure a lot of your world, in this period of time in the last 3 or 4 years. So a lot of what had happened, the leading up to the closure of the business and all of the struggle that was happening in that, and then closing the business and then leading into the struggle of not having the business and then really sitting in a place of how do I reinvent myself? Well, what's next for me? And then coming out the other side and deciding to do something that is in some ways feels so different. Like I went from a boutique wine tour guide to guiding people in their, personal lives and helping to coach them through, living a life more abundantly, more joyfully, more in alignment with who they are, which makes sense when I say it like that. But, sometimes I almost felt like I was going from this very vast, different kind of career to another career. Like, what were people going to think about me with me shifting gears so much, And so, going through a lot of those motions and a lot of making decisions about myself, changing my mind about things, changing my belief system about things, and showing up differently. And I've done a lot of changing in the last few years. And so much so that I actually find myself sometimes in conversations with people that I knew, prior to all of this shift that has happened inside of me. And I meet them now and I feel like I'm showing up as a totally different person. And maybe they don't feel that, but I feel that. My energy is different than it used to be. The way that I show up is different than it used to be. And I just feel like everything that has happened has led me to where I am today and has put me on this path that I feel like I actually could have been on all along. I just couldn't see through all the stuff to get myself here. I had to go through all the pieces that I've experienced in these last few years in order to get to this place. And, it's like we have to give gratitude to what has happened to us, or really ultimately what has happened for us to get us to the place where we are today. It's so hard when we're facing so much struggle and what feels like defeat and, constant feeling of survival and never getting past that place and just constantly just spinning and turning and spinning and turning and spinning and turning and not making any shift or change. And, it really impacts you. And eventually when you can move yourself out of that place and shift into, more of where you're meant to be, it's like you can look back and go, oh, that's why I had to experience that. Because without that experience, I wouldn't be having this experience, right? I couldn't jump from before then to now. I had to go through that thing in the middle in order to bring me to where I am today. And literally, if you're listening to this, it's like wherever you are, I just want to take a pause in a moment to remind you that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And it may not feel like that. It may feel like all things are falling off the rails, or it might feel like all the right pieces haven't aligned yet, or you might feel like you just keep trying all the things and nothing is sticking. Listen to me when I say that it's coming for you and you are exactly where you're supposed to be, because everything that you are experiencing is what you're meant to experience and bring you to the next part. And one day you're going to look back and you're going to go, I get it. Without that, I couldn't be this. Without that experience, I couldn't show up this way. Without that, I wouldn't have known about this, right? All the experiences that we have lead us to where we are. And so as I reflect about that and share that with you, and as I was going through all that turmoil, oh my gosh, I was in such a stressful place. I was eating terribly. I was drinking alcohol more often than not. Certainly through the pandemic, there were days, weeks where I would have wine every day. 2 glasses of wine a day was like an everyday thing. I know I'm not alone in that. Was definitely drinking more, eating more bread. Who wasn't making bread during that time of our lives? And really, eating more sugar and just not paying attention. It was like anything that I can put into my body or into my face that helps me feel better in this really shitty fucking time in the world, I'm going to put into my face. And then of course, coming through that, it was like my body started to slowly sort of deteriorate during that time. And when I say that, what I mean is, naturally I put on weight because I was eating foods that I normally didn't eat. Certainly not that often. I was drinking way more. So it was working on my mental health, and I was really kind of going in a downward spin. And I don't think I realized until more recently that I think I was actually in a depression most of that period of time. Like most of those few years, I was in a depressed state, and I'm sure that it had a big part to do with the fact that I was drinking a lot, but also that, my business was failing because the world fell apart and everything was upside down and I couldn't run my business. Like there were all these things going on, causing a whole lot of stress, right? So we've got tons of stress. We've got eating, overeating, eating all the things, eating, putting everything in my face, and then also drinking a lot more alcohol while going through all this stressful time and not really dealing with anything that I was experiencing, right? Like I think many of us were in a place like that. And anyway, needless to say, I would say from the time that I closed my previous business, actually, even before that, my body knew that I just wasn't operating at the normal way. Like when I started my business, I was in probably some of the best shape of my adult life. I was working out every day. I was like eating beautifully whole cooked meals, was seldomly putting junk in my body, seldomly putting sugar or alcohol in my body. And then it got to this point where I almost felt like I couldn't live without it, And, Oscar. Oscar is awake. Meet my dog, Oscar. He is very vocal and has a lot to say. And I think that there's a car pulling down the street that's got his back up a little bit here. So let's just hope that he calms down. Okay. He's going to lie back down for a minute. So let's hope we have a few more minutes here. So I was going through all of that. And like I said, my body was really starting to talk to me. It was like, there were so many times I was like, I really shouldn't be eating this. I really shouldn't be having a drink. But it was like, I was so bleh and living in the muck that I was just like, why not? You know, what else is going on? Why am I not doing this? I want to do this. It makes me feel better. So I'm going to do it. And needless to say, when I was saying like I started to deteriorate, of course, like I said, I was putting on weight. I wasn't moving as much. At first I was walking my dog all the time. And then our dog passed, so I wasn't even walking and was consuming all these things and wasn't having any fun. I mean, let's be honest, that time of our world was pretty sad for a lot of us. Certainly me, I live alone, or I live with my son who was at the time was with me 50-50. So there was a lot of alone time and a lot of loneliness that happened during that time. So there was so many things in the mix, right? And maybe you're nodding along as you listen to this episode, like recognizing yourself in what I'm saying. And I just want to say, like, I see you and I feel you. And I want you to know that there is a way out of that feeling. If you're still in that place or still in a version of that place, there is like hope on the other side. And, you know, sometimes we have to be like jarred out of that, in order to wake us up, in order to make a shift and make a change. And for me, that's what happened. So the story is that, as of course, all of this is going on, I have always known of myself to like, I've always had a hard time focusing, certainly on things I don't want to do, tedious details, things, micro details of things are really not my jam. And I'm easily excited. I love to do things that I love. I love to have fun. And, I started to recognize in myself that my ability to focus became less and less, right? My ability to really zone in, like I used to be able to like, the only term I can think to use is to hyper focus on things. So it was like, if I had a project that I was doing, it was like, I would procrastinate. And then boom, I'd jump into that project and I wouldn't put it down until it was done, right? Like I remember building my first website for the Buzz Tour. And I remember I basically sat at my desk for 5 days and built a website like that. I taught myself how to do it. I created all the website. I did all that work and created a website in 5 days and didn't even come up for a breath of fresh air. Like I'm pretty sure I did that on a week that my son was with his dad, so that I could manage that. And, but I used to be able to hyper focus like that and then take breaks and then jump into things and take breaks. But it got to the point where I wasn't really even able to hyper focus. And I was like, what is going on? And of course, around the same time, I started to really connect with a lot of the messaging that was out there about like neurodivergent or neurodivergence and, maybe struggling with like the possibility of, connecting and aligning with the description of like ADD or ADHD. And a lot of the things that were coming up for me were like, at first I was like kind of in denial about it. Like, there's no way I have that. Like there's like that whole idea in your mind, like there's something wrong with me. Right. And so I just want to say for the record that there is nothing wrong with you, and whatever you are experiencing is your experience, and there is nothing wrong with you. There are other people out there that have your experience, and they are hoping that you're going to open your mouth and start sharing your story so that they don't feel alone. That's why I'm sharing mine, because I feel like there's so many of us that run into this, especially as women who aren't able to connect the dots earlier in life because there hasn't been enough research on women's health. There hasn't been enough research in this area of the world or the area of research. And yeah, you're probably not alone in how you're feeling. So I started to really connect the dots between the descriptions and how people were describing what their life experience was like having ADD or ADHD. And I was like, isn't this interesting? I'm really connecting with this. But like I said, I was kind of in denial about it. I was like, no, there's no way that that's me, because then it means there's something wrong with me and it puts a label on me, and I don't love labels, like all the things. And but then the more I listened and the more research that I did and the more people I talked to and the more people that were sharing their story about realizing later in life, other women were realizing later in life that they had been struggling with this, and that the experience for girls and women is different than it is for boys and men. And we show things differently. And a lot of us have been sort of like cloaking our symptoms most of our lives in really quirky ways. And I was like, I started to connect the dots with all of those. And I'm going to get into that maybe in another episode, but I started to really make the connection. And what's interesting is that for me, it was happening sort of like all of these things were tunneling in together. So it's like, okay, imagine like all that stress of being in the business, going through that time of our lives, then realizing I had to close the business, then identifying with like this likelihood that I'm somewhere on the neurodivergent scale, and all the things, then reconnecting to myself through the help and support of an intuitive coach who helped really bring me back to life again. And then starting this new career in coaching myself and, public speaking, podcasting, coaching women, group community, all these different things. And so it's like all this stuff is going on, right? And obviously I was able to focus at certain points because you can't do something if you can't do anything. You know what I'm saying? So, but I was creating all of these things. Oops, sorry, I just hit the microphone. And gosh, where was I going with that? See, focus, trying to remember where I left off, trying to remember where I was going with all of this to express this to you. Let's take a beat here. Where was I going with this? This happens sometimes, by the way. But I think ultimately where I was going is to say that there was so much going on. And I finally was like, okay, first of all, I need to find out if this is actually me, because I would talk to people about it. They're like, have you been tested? And I'm like, no. And I'm like, I'm okay to just align with some of these ideas and know that I'm just not alone out there in what I've been experiencing, that I'm not just some fucking weirdo who has experienced these really weird symptoms all of my life and no one's talking about it. So that for me to a certain degree was enough. But then the more I started to connect with other women who had been identified as being neurodivergent later in life, started making all these connections to like our hormones. And as we go through different hormone cycles, the symptoms tend to show up more. And I was like, isn't that interesting? So at the same time that I was going through all this stress, closing the business, basically in a depression, restarting a business, refinding myself, all of these things in all of this mess in that time of our lives, I was also experiencing perimenopause, which I did not realize at the time. And so I just started to, again, right? Maybe if you're listening, you're connecting these dots with me and you're like, okay. So all of these things are happening. All of these dots are starting to connect. And I'm like, maybe it would be helpful if I found out that I actually am neurodivergent, which, you know what? Okay, I don't love labels and I don't like, fitting into any kind of a box, but anybody who's neurodivergent doesn't fit into a box, which is kind of comical in itself. So I was like, okay, well, you know what? Why don't I just go and get some, maybe I could get some meds from my doctor. I can go to him and express what I've been experiencing, that I've been identifying with all of these symptoms, and maybe he can just provide me a prescription so I can get on something that helps me focus so I can get more accomplished, because I kind of was feeling like everything I'm trying to do is taking forever because I can't stay focused for long. And, when I say it all out loud, it's like, well, of course you couldn't focus. You had all this shit going on, right? So again, maybe you identify in my story. So I decided to call my doctor and asked him if I could come in and talk to him about ADHD meds. So as I'm in there having a conversation with him, he's like, what makes you think that this is what's going on? So I tell him all of these symptoms that I'm aligning with and all these things that have been going on. And of course, he doesn't even mention perimenopause, which I feel like this needs to be another conversation. And in fact, there's a few women in my life who do work in the perimenopausal field that I think I'm going to have to bring in to have conversations with them about this, because a lot of physicians don't necessarily understand, because there's very little research done on women, especially when it comes to, anything really that has to do with women. Most research is done on men. And so I really feel like bringing one of the men or a few of the men would probably be really, really helpful. And maybe I'll put that on my radar to do, is that, where was I going with that? So I had said to him, I have been experiencing some of these, and he doesn't even get into the perimenopause, doesn't even talk about hormone changes, doesn't talk about anything, and just says, okay, I can't give you ADHD meds until I know that your body can handle it. So we have to send you for an EKG and we have to send you for some blood work so that we can see that you're healthy and everything is good. Because if we give you meds, this is like putting you on a rocket ship. So if I put you on a rocket ship, I need to know that your heart and your body can go along for the ride, essentially. That's how I describe it. He didn't say the rocket ship, but that's kind of how I understand it. So, long and the short of it, he gives me, oh my gosh, that slip, that paper where you go get an EKG done and you get some blood work done. I don't know. I can't think of the term. And I make my appointments and I go and get the work done. And almost immediately I hear back from him and he's like, okay, your EKG came back clear, but your blood work came back with your liver enzymes coming in slightly elevated. So it may not be anything of concern, but we'd like to dig a little bit deeper and do an ultrasound, find out what's going on in there, and also do some more blood work to further kind of discover what's going on. And I was like, okay, trying not to be too worried. And decided to go ahead and get this ultrasound and all of these things, thinking, first of all, I'm actually just going to pause the story here for a second to say that I have talked to a variety of people, and I would say the majority of men that I know, or boys, that have gone to their doctors and asked for ADHD meds, they have been met with, okay, and a prescription pad, here you go. And a couple of the women that I've been talking to that have asked for the same thing have gone through a similar process as me, which I find really interesting. So I don't know why that is. I hear a lot of women saying that they face a lot of resistance when they start talking about the fact that they have all these experiences and that the people in their lives, even the doctors in their lives, don't necessarily agree that they have this challenge. Meanwhile, it's just because a lot of the research doesn't point to women's symptoms, which are different than men's. And anyway, so I just felt like that was important to note in this part of the story. Okay, so I'll carry on. So I go back for an ultrasound and some further blood work, and he gets back to me to tell me that the ultrasound has found that I have a fatty liver. In fact, I have what were his words? A severe fatty liver. And I was like, well, that doesn't sound good. And then he continues to tell me that this has become a younger person's challenge, disease, concern, because our lifestyles are so different. And it used to be that the average person who had a severe or a fatty liver in general was somebody who was much older. And now that the average age is like 40, like starts in the 40s. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I had no idea. And then I further learn that it's really hard to detect, so that you don't know if you have fatty liver. And I was shocked to learn this and started to do some more research. And of course, again, take this with a grain of salt. I'm not a researcher. I am certainly don't have all the information. I'm just going to share some of what I have been enlightened with as I have been trying to understand what's going on with me, and what it means and what its impact is. And when I started reading about it, I learned that there are very few symptoms of fatty liver, until it gets to the point where you can't do anything about it. So oftentimes, like, symptoms are things like your urine starts to get a really horrible color. Your eyes start to yellow, your skin starts to yellow. Those are usually indicators that you are now in liver disease, and or you have liver cancer and it's irreversible. So there's not often a lot of symptoms that pop up that indicate to you if you have a fatty liver. And I was like, how am I just like, this is the first time I've ever even heard about this. And then I start talking to another friend who tells me that one of her girlfriends, who's a little younger than I am, I mean, this friend is about 36, so I'm going to guess that her friend is about the same age, that she also just found out she has a fatty liver. And now that I've been starting to have conversations with people, I'm starting to learn that all of these people, like, I've had like probably a dozen different conversations with people about this who all know somebody who's in a roughly similar age range who has a fatty liver. And I was like, how is this? Like, this is insanity. How do we not know about this? No one's talking about this. And so, of course, I start to ask questions. I asked my doctor some questions, and of course did some further research. So learned that, of course, diet plays a really huge role in fatty liver. But oftentimes it can be also related to gut health. Gosh, I need to bring in a perimenopause expert, and I need to bring in a gut expert and a liver expert. I'm going to bring in a nutritionist. Like, I want to bring in a few different people to talk about this. So imagine that's going to come down the line. But essentially, that when your gut is off, when your gut has a hard time or is intolerant to certain foods, which I have faced food intolerance for some time, but it started with like wheat and dairy for me, or cow dairy for me. And then as life went on, and interestingly enough, when my life started to get even more stressful, I started showing up with other symptoms. So like I couldn't eat things like eggs or onions or garlic or all of these other different things, any vegetables from the shade family. Like all of a sudden I couldn't eat all of these things. I was getting severely bloated, and having all kinds of like gastro issues. And I really just thought, okay, well, clearly there's something really wrong with me. And no matter who I talked to in my history, wasn't able to really put the pieces together, because your naturopath, who helps you with your gut inflammation and helping you repair your gut, doesn't necessarily have a relationship with the doctor, who understands that liver or fatty liver doesn't show itself in symptoms, but can be connected to gut intolerance or gut issues, gut problems with digestion. So that in itself, I find really interesting. And again, take all of what I'm sharing with you as a grain of salt, because I've done my own personal research. I encourage you to go into your own, but just these are some of the connections that I was starting to make, and that it's not just about, yes, so there was a period of time there, like I expressed, that I was filling my face with all of the things and putting on weight and working out less and moving my body less and all of these things, which were probably huge contributing factors to this fact that the fatty liver disease exists in my body, but not disease, but severe fatty liver. I don't have liver disease. I have a severe fatty liver. There is a difference. I just find it really interesting that there's a connection to gut health. And the more I talk to other people, especially women, I find that many of them are suffering from gut health, gut indigestion, unable to eat certain foods because their bodies can't handle it. And then I learned that stress is a major impactor for gut health, and that when you don't have proper gut health, it can impact all of the digestion materials or your parts of your body that help you digest food, which includes like the liver, kidneys, like all of these different parts, right? So I'm expressing that because I just wanted to paint you a little bit of a picture. Like if you start going down the rabbit hole, of course, the internet is huge and wide and tells you all kinds of things. But essentially the synopsis that I'm getting is that when your body is essentially not working optimally, you have the chance or the possibility of having a fatty liver. And that's where I'm at. My gut health has not been awesome for, 7 or 8 years, right? And got really bad during that time of our lives where everything was shut down and things were upside down. So when you incorporate stress, you incorporate poor eating habits, you incorporate moving less, and you incorporate the fact that we have so much stress in our lives. Like, oh my gosh, I think of some of the things that I have experienced or been through or survived. And they're really impactful to the overall workings of our body. And so I was shocked to learn that I have a severely fatty liver. And so I then, of course, after learning all of those things, I'm like, okay, so what can I do to help improve this? Because I also learned that a fatty liver is one of the things that can be reversed. It's pretty pliable and is pretty reversible. So as long as you don't get too far, as long as you don't have liver disease or you don't have cancer or liver cancer, you're in a good position to be able to reverse the effect of the fatty liver. So I started looking into that and started realizing that if I drank lemon water every morning, that would help, because it helps with digestion, but also would help the liver. And eating all these certain kinds of foods that are easier to digest, and not basically everything I read said to reduce the amount of alcohol intake, fatty foods, and sugar, like those three things, the three things that I probably ate the most during those 3 years of our lives, and was still like not eating them all or drinking all the time, but some of those habits were kind of hard to kill off, right? Like, I don't know about you, but I certainly experienced a challenge in getting back to like regular routines. Even when life kind of like started to normalize, I was still struggling to get back into my old routines because everything had changed. So even though I wasn't eating and drinking quite like I was during that time, I was still eating and drinking more than I was pre all of that time, right? So it's like the pre-P and then the post-P. You know what I'm talking about. Anyways, I just don't want to say the word. So long and the short of it, I decided that when I learned about this and I learned that fatty foods, high sugar diet, and alcohol were huge contributing factors to a fatty liver, I was like, okay, well, guess what's got to go? Sugar, fatty foods, and alcohol. And I, like cold turkey, just gave up drinking, eating fatty foods, and eating sugar. And so I stopped doing those things tail end of December. So like somewhere between Christmas and New Year's, or it might even have been right before Christmas. No, I think it was right after Christmas. Anyway, somewhere around that time. And I haven't had a lick of alcohol since. And I've had like little pieces, like if I've been somewhere and there's a little bit of sugar in something, like I'll consume it, but I'm not consuming it on a regular basis. Certainly it's not in my diet regularly here at home. And so naturally, as soon as I gave up all of those things, I started to feel a little bit better. And so far, I don't really know exactly like what's to come of this. I don't know how much recovery my liver has gone through since learning of my severely fatty liver back in late December of 2023. But I do have an appointment coming up next month in April that will identify. It's like, I think it's some version of like an ultrasound, but like a supersonic ultrasound. That's not what it's called. That's my word for it. But something that will kind of like focus on that area and show me where my fatty liver is, like what stage I'm at, what it looks like, if it's getting better, how much healing potential I have, et cetera, like all of those things, which I think are really important to know. And so I've been essentially working toward healing my body from the inside out, right? And fueling myself better, feeling better, and considering that, like, you know what, unfortunately it took this random go to the doctor and ask him for ADHD meds, which led me to what I wasn't expecting, to get all these tests, which in the big scheme of things is kind of a silver lining. And then to learn that I actually have a fatty liver and that this is pretty common with a lot of people my age. And so the more I have conversations with other people that I know, it's like, I know people that drink a whole lot more than me. I know people who have, worse diets than me. And it's like, consider going and getting yourself checked, because if it gets to the point where you can't reverse it, like there's other really big things they're going to come, right? Like our lifestyles have changed so much, certainly in these last several years, that it can make a really big impact. So I share all of this with you because, I'm not like in the clear, so to speak, of like a fatty liver. I am still looking to see what, because it takes a little bit of time to get this appointment with the specialist to get the vision or the visibility on your liver to be able to tell sort of what stage your liver, fatty liver is at, and how recoverable or reversible it is for you. And so I've more to share to come on this, but what I can tell you is this. I can tell you that since having that sort of identified and changing the way that I eat and not consuming alcohol, I'm sleeping a whole lot better. My energy is better. It's not awesome yet, because apparently one of the signs, or I know one of the symptoms of a fatty liver is exhaustion. So like it does explain a lot of it. So I don't know how long this has existed in my body, but I know it's been around for a while. And because I've been exhausted for some time, which could partly do with burnout, but also could also have a lot to do with this like fatty liver situation. So I share all of that because like I'm okay, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be fine, and I'll keep you updated as to what's going on. Partly I share it as a bit of a PSA, because if you're I think like if there's any symptoms, I think it is that if you're feeling lethargic and really tired all the time and can't seem to get your energy back, no matter what you're doing, like eating better, moving your body more, like all these different things, this might be something you want to get checked out. But I also mention it because I think it's important to recognize that, first of all, as women, but secondly, that when your body is telling you something is off, there's a good chance that it knows, right? It's like our body gives us indicators about what's going on with us before somebody else else tells us what's going on with us, right? And so for me, it's like I felt like my body was telling me for a long time that something was off, but I just couldn't put my finger on it, even though I knew I was doing some of these unhealthy habits and really needed to make some change, but was really struggling to make some of that change, to then move into, okay, this is your reality. This is what is going on in your body. And the only way to reverse it is to shift gears in some of these things. And I was like, okay, my body has been telling me for a long time that something's up, and now I know what it is. So I'm going to do something about it. Right. So I share this because few things. One, listen to your body when it tells you. Number two, it doesn't hurt to go and get checked up. And, I think especially as we're living in midlife, like I'm 48 years old, I'll be 49 this year. And, as we kind of crawl into like this middle-aged time of our lives, you don't feel as invincible as you did when you're in your 20s, right? Like in your 20s, you feel like you could do anything and you could recover from anything. And as you get a little closer to midlife, you realize like you're kind of at that halfway mark, right? Like who knows how old I'll be when I finally go, right? Like could be tomorrow, could be 10 years from now, could be when I'm 100. Like I have no idea when it's going to be, but this is like, the midlife of life. And so I want to make the best of it. And I just encourage you that if you're feeling kind of sluggish and you're not feeling yourself, and, maybe you already know that some of those lifestyle choices need to change for you too. Like, this is me encouraging you to go and get it checked out, because we live once, right? And when we're middle-aged and we're realizing that, we're not invincible, and that, we may or may not have a whole lot of time left, I don't know, it's worth it to take better care of ourselves. And so I'm trying to do that, and as a result of like all of this, I think the other piece that I really wanted to share with you is that like through all of this, it's like, you know what, my body has put on weight. I've really struggled to kind of see myself in clothes, see myself on camera. That's been really challenging for me to be able to see. And lucky for me, I have two friends that are in the coaching space of helping women, love themselves and their bodies, no matter what size they are, no matter where they're at in their life. And that's been super helpful. In fact, certainly as we've been growing and working toward, curating this Bloom event that's happening on March 23rd, that, it's been really helpful to have them in my corner, because I have been learning through them to, my body is going to change sizes. My habits are going to change over the course of my life. My body's going to bounce back a little less easily than it did in my 20s or my 30s. And all of that's okay, right? Like we're more than our bodies. We're more than how we physically show up. We are so much more than what we look like. And that, we can make shifts and changes whenever we want. If we have the desire to live a better life, that there are ways that we can do that, and we can lean into that. So naturally, as all of this was going on, it was about the same time that I decided to take a hiatus from recording podcast episodes and giving myself a little bit more time, after I made the connection that stress was also a contributing factor to a fatty liver and the gut challenges that I was having, and all these things, it's all connected, right? And so I really knew that I needed to take a break, and I've started to really just lean into listening to my body more. Like when it tells me I'm tired and I need to have a nap, I go and have a nap. When, I have all these ideas and things that I want to do, but it gets to the end of the day and I just can't do them all, I give myself some grace, because A, I'm human. B, my body is trying to recover from something, and C, like I don't have to keep up with anything. I can do things at my pace when I have the energy to do them, and that's okay. And I can sort of shift my focus on what that's going to look like for me, or, how much I can expect of myself, right? So I just felt like it was important to share. I felt like you kind of needed maybe a bit of an update, and maybe you've been listening to this episode and maybe it's connecting dots in your own life. Like I'm not going to sit here and say that I'll never have a drink again, or that I'll never eat a French fry again, or, but I certainly, for me, I sometimes can struggle with that balance of food sometimes, right? It's like I get myself into the habit of eating things that aren't great for me, or drinking more often, and then I have a harder time moving it out of my life. And I'd like to get to a point where, I can just let it go. Like I've let it go. I've hardly even thought about having a drink in the last 3 months. And And I haven't really been missing it. I haven't been missing it in my social circles. It feels better to not drink. But it doesn't mean I'm never going to have a drink again. It doesn't mean I'm never going to find balance in my body again. And it doesn't mean that I can never make room for different things that I want to do. But that for now, this is what I'm choosing to do for me. And I don't judge anybody who chooses to do similarly or differently. We all have to do what's right for us. But I just felt like I would share this piece of my story to catch you up from what that health scare was even all about, to where I am today. Like I said, I feel like I have more and more energy all the time. I'm certainly not my full energetic self, but I am working toward that, and I'm moving more, and lots of things, like I'm noticing the stress in my body, and I'm slowing down when I need to slow down. So I'm paying attention, and maybe this is just like a note to you to also pay attention to you, right? It's like we often get so wrapped up in doing all the things and getting all the things done and making sure that all the promises that we've made, we're doing the things, and we're honoring our promises. But oftentimes we're not honoring the promise to ourselves to take care of ourselves. And oftentimes we're missing out on taking care of us because we're taking care of everybody else. And I know for me, that was a thing for me. I have often taken care of other people or done all the things outside of me first instead of considering myself. And that has shifted gears for me in a huge way, not just in these last few months, certainly in these last couple of years, that has really shifted a lot. But I just want to encourage you and remind you to take care of yourself and listen to your body when it says to slow down. And, like burning the candle at both ends is not honorable, but it is honorable to take care of you so that you have more days. And when you give back to you and you pour back into your own cup, you have so much more to offer other people. And I'm certainly finding that's true. So there's our catch-up session. If you have any questions, I would love for you to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer them. And I will continue to catch you up on, so like when I go and get this, whatever scan I'm getting on my liver next month, I will be sure to update you and let you know what's going on. I also have a psych evaluation about the ADHD, ADD, to see if I fall into the neurotypical sort of, or neurodiverse plane, which I'm certain I do, and or if it's just hormones that are causing my body to be thrown off in perimenopause that are creating a lot of this. But everything in my body says, no, these are a lot of the symptoms that have been going on for a really long time in your life, just that there have been points in your life that they have gotten worse, and this is the worst that they have been. So, everything in my body says that they're connected to that whole neurodiversity aspect, but I will have more information for you when I have more information. I'll share it with you. I'm kind of an open book. I do believe in sharing our stories because I think it helps others, and it's part of my story. So I'm here to share it. But that's all for now. I will see you next time on the podcast. And like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I will have all of my information and contact places that you can reach out to me in the show notes. So feel free to do that. And I look forward to hearing from you. And other than that, I hope you have an awesome day and an awesome week, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode. I'd like to invite you to hit the follow button on this podcast so you'll be notified when the next one drops. And if you liked this episode, please leave a review, as it will help others to find this message. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at It's Me, Christine D. Or if you'd like to connect about being a guest on the show, ask me about group or one-on-one joy and mindset coaching, learn more about the Joy Project community, or consider hiring me for your next speaking engagement, please visit itsmechristined.ca. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.